The first atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima.
Over humanity!
The fires of frustration and discord are burning in every
Let us
city.
not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead.
They say that those who forget their history are condemned to repeat it. This is the History Lessons Podcast with certified financial planning practitioner Patrick Huey, author of History Lessons for the Modern Investor, and your guide to financial wisdom in the past, present, and future. You ready? Good. Let's get historical.
Historical? This is the History Lessons Podcast for the week of 24 June 2024. I'm Patrick Huey, author of History Lessons for the Modern Investor. And if you're a modern investor seeking some historical perspective right now, you're not alone, and you find yourself in the right place. This week, we'll be talking about the summer solstice, Beatles tech, and stock options.
But first, the news.
Well, last week, as we marked the summer solstice, the longest day of the year, it was a significant time to illuminate the latest economic trends and their profound impacts. Just as the solstice combines extended daylight and the inevitable dusk, the recent economic data presents a blend of bright spots and potentially looming shadows. Let's start with industrial production. For that, it was a bright, sunny day. May saw industrial production increase by 0.9%. That's the largest monthly gain since early 2023, with every major category contributing positively. Manufacturing, the biggest contributor, also rose by 0.9%, casting a warm glow on that sometimes dour sector, something sorely missing for most of this year. One particularly bright spot has been the production of high-tech equipment, which soared 8.2% over the last year. This growth, likely fueled by investments in AI, outshines any other major category over that period. Let's then move to housing starts, which were a lengthening shadow. In contrast to the abundant daylight, housing starts fell by 5.5% in May, casting a long shadow over the housing market. This significant decline underscores the persistent issue of too few homes being built, which in turn keeps home prices elevated and rents rising across much of the country. And that shortage of new homes contributes directly to inflation, as housing is a major component of that calculation. Existing home sales. That was the evening dusk. Much like the gradual fade of daylight, existing home sales experienced a decline of 0.7% in May, marking the third consecutive monthly drop. Housing market remains stuck in the shadows due to affordability issues. First, sales are facing headwinds from mortgage rates that remain above 7%. Second, as we discussed, home prices are rising again, with the median price of an existing home up 5.8% from a year ago. Assuming a 20% down payment, the rise in mortgage rates since the Federal Reserve began its tightening cycle in March of 2022 has led to a 43% increase in monthly payments on a new 30-year mortgage for the median existing home. Finally, retail sales, a flickering light. Retail sales in May rose by a mere 0.1%, failing to meet consensus expectations for the second straight month. Factoring in revisions, retail sales actually declined by 0.3% in May against an expected gain of 0.3%. Through the first 5 months of 2024, retail sales have decreased at an annualized rate of 0.1%, indicating that U.S. consumers are finally feeling the strain of higher borrowing costs and depleted COVID-era savings. Maybe, just maybe, there's more light in the data these days than darkness. At least it seems that way as we get through the solstice and on to the rest of summer.
Interest rates are rising, and your annuity purchased in the last decade might not be keeping up, which means your financial plan may be falling behind. So if you own a deferred annuity, fixed, indexed, or variable worth more than $250,000, Now is the time to review it and make sure it is doing all that it can for you and your financial plan. Let us help you keep your retirement on track. Introducing Victory Independent Planning. VIP turns complex financial matters into clear and confident solutions, so you can relax and enjoy retirement whenever it arrives. Get the Annuity Review Kit now. This complimentary kit includes a variety of checklists, resources, and ebooks to review the fees, features, and flexibility, or lack thereof, in your current annuity contract. It will even help you assess your overall investment goals and the people who are offering you advice. Get the kit today, because you can't teach an old annuity new tricks. To learn how VIP can help you review your annuity, click on the link in the show notes or go to victoryindependentplanning.com. That's victoryindependentplanning.com. Sign up for peace of mind today.
Alexa, charge the Wayback Machine and set it for 1967 AD.
Charging Wayback Machine.
On June 27th, 1967, Our World, the first live international satellite television broadcast, airs. This historic event was a 2-hour program that linked 5 continents and featured segments from 14 different countries. The goal was to showcase global unity and technological progress through satellite communication. Our World was created to demonstrate the capabilities of satellite broadcasting by showing live footage from around the world. The BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, produced the program in collaboration with broadcasters from various countries, including Canada, Japan, Mexico, Italy, and Australia. Each participating country presented segments that illustrated their culture, accomplishments, and even daily life. One of the most memorable segments included a live performance of All You Need Is Love by the Beatles from a studio in London. The song was specifically and specially commissioned for the broadcast to emphasize the message of love and unity. The Beatles' performance of All You Need Is Love became a defining moment of the 1960s, encapsulating the era's ethos of peace and love. The program reached over 400 million people and demonstrated the massive potential of live satellite transmission for global communication and perhaps bringing together large groups of people through the use of technology. The optimism of the 1960s, man. Well, so much for that. In today's hyper-connected world, technology should have the potential to bring people closer than ever before, and yet we remain as divided and technologically as divisive as ever. Here are a few reasons why. How about miscommunication in the digital age? Lack of nonverbal cueing in digital interactions means we often miss the nuances of body language and tone, which are crucial for understanding context. Text-based messages can easily be misread, leading to misunderstandings. Privacy and security concerns. Data privacy is a dream unrealized at this point. Sharing personal information online raises significant privacy concerns, and the risk of cyber threats like hacking and identity theft erodes trust in digital platforms that could otherwise be of some potential value. How about digital overload and burnout? Information overload is a real daily experience for many folks. The sheer volume of online information can be overwhelming, and prolonged screen time can lead to fatigue, reducing the quality of interactions. Just ask my 10-year-old son. Authenticity and trust issues. Curated identities online, which is almost everyone, means that almost no one is who they seem. People often present idealized versions of themselves online, creating unrealistic expectations. You think? Dependency and isolation. Over-reliance on technology is as bad as any other excess. Excessive reliance on digital communications can often lead, paradoxically, to feelings of isolation. Reduced interpersonal skills. Wow. Heavy use of digital tools can erode important interpersonal skills. You may have noticed the last time you attempted a conversation with a stranger who's younger than you are. And that brings us to generational gaps. Varying communication styles across generations can create barriers. And guess what? Older generations might resist new technologies, leading to disconnects. Finally, echo chambers and polarization. Algorithm bias means that you see more of what you like or agree with. Social media algorithms often create echo chambers, limiting exposure to diverse viewpoints, and online communities can intensify polarization, reducing tolerance for differing perspectives. Modern investors should pay special attention to the last. Talking to the same people about the same things day after day may be entertaining. I don't know. However, it is not the way to grow and evolve as an investor. As John, Paul, George, and Ringo likely realized decades ago, you actually need a bit more than love. Getting out of your comfort zone, turning off the echo chamber of mass media, and keeping an open mind are keys to recognizing and evaluating new opportunities.
Wayback Machine disengaged.
Returning to the year 2024.
Well, finally this week, it's on to the mailbag.
You've got mail.
This week's question of the week was, how do I manage my company stock options? And remember, if you're listening to this podcast and want to see the visuals referenced during this segment, please join us on Substack, where you can view the video version of this podcast, or on YouTube, where you can do the same. So last week, we started talking about a client that I have named Mike, and he has equity compensation through his employer. And last week, we talked about restricted stock units, RSUs, that are part of his compensation and his retirement and income plans, as well as, obviously, his tax planning. So this week, we'll look at the second part of his equity compensation, his stock options. Let's spend some time talking through stock options, and we'll finish up with the second part of Mike's story. Now, while many companies since the 90s have favored other types of equity grants like restricted stock units and performance shares, stock options still remain a major form of equity compensation. So let's take a look at some of the basics. First up, what exactly are stock options? Well, stock options give you the right, but not the obligation, to purchase a specified number of shares of your company's stock at a fixed price during a set time frame. The purchase is called the exercise, and the fixed price set at the grant is called the exercise price. So we've got some verbology there. We've got the grant, we've got the exercise, and we've got the exercise price. And then typically you must continue working at the company for a specified period before you can exercise any of your stock options. And this period is known as the vesting period. And it is going to be outlined by a vesting schedule, meaning from the time you are granted until the time you can exercise is that vesting period, and it's going to be defined by a vesting schedule. Okay. Companies can grant two main types of options. We've got the first up on the screen now. That is the non-qualified stock option, or NQSO. And then the second is called an incentive stock option, or ISO. Before we dive into the differences, it's crucial that you check your grant agreement to know which type you have. Many companies now use what they call an omnibus stock plan, allowing them to grant both types of stock options, ISOs and QSOs, as well as other forms of equity like restricted stock, RSUs, performance shares, and stock appreciation rights. Mike's agreement had two parts to it: the non-qualified stock options, which we're going to talk about, and the previously covered restricted stock units. If you have a question on RSUs, please check out last week's show. It's from June 19th, 2024. And if you're unsure about the type of award you've received, please reach out to your stock plan administrator or the person managing your company's employee stock option plan. Okay, on to non-qualified stock options, or NQSOs. These are the most common type of stock option, and they can be granted to pretty much anybody: employees, officers, directors, contractors, and even consultants. So here are a few points about NQSOs. Number one, they do not qualify for special favorable tax treatment under the US IRC or the Internal Revenue Code. Unexercised, non-qualified stock options, this is number two, can be transferred to others, such as during a divorce or through gifting. Number three, there's no tax code limitation on the total number or value of non-qualified stock options that can be granted to an individual. Number four, taxes are paid when you exercise non-qualified stock options, with the exercised spread being reported as compensation income on your IRS Form W-2 for that calendar year. And number five, your company will withhold federal income tax, Social Security, Medicare, and state taxes when you exercise non-qualified stock options, all of which are going to appear on that Form W-2. It is true compensation, and it shows as such on your tax forms. Number six, after the exercise, when you sell your shares, you'll need to report the stock sale on Form 8949 and Schedule D of your Form 1040 tax return. Capital gains rules will apply, and they potentially mean more taxes depending on your performance and your holding period. For more detailed explanation of the tax rules, you'll need to do your homework or work with someone who is familiar with taxation of equity compensation. The general life cycle of non-qualified options is as follows: a grant, a vesting period, an exercise, paying tax, a sale, and a second tax if applicable. Okay, beware of expiration dates. They can and will sneak up on you if you're not tracking all of your grants and awards. Now, let's take a few minutes and briefly talk about incentive stock options, or ISOs. Incentive stock options do offer special tax benefits, but they come with a boatload of complexities related to required holding periods and the alternative minimum tax. So incentive stock options have a similar life cycle as non-qualified, but with some taxation wrinkles. So here are the important points about ISOs. Number one, ISOs can only be granted to employees. Directors, consultants, contractors, you're out of luck. Number two, there's a $100,000 limit on the aggregate grant value of ISOs that can become exercisable in any calendar year. So there's a cap. Number three, to retain ISO tax benefits after leaving the company, you must exercise your ISOs within 3 months of your employment termination, though longer periods apply for disability or death. So think about the calendar if you are considering leaving and have ISOs sitting around. Number four, ISOs cannot be transferred to others, such as through divorce or by gifting. Number five, people are often told that ISOs, also known as qualified stock options, are more remunerative, meaning they pay more than non-qualified stock options, because they are not subject to ordinary income and payroll tax at exercise, whereas non-qualifieds are. In addition, if you hold the resulting incentive stock option for more than a year from exercise, and it's been at least 2 years since the ISOs were granted, you get to sell the stock and ultimately pay only long-term capital gain tax rates on the difference between the strike price and your sale price. So that sounds pretty good. And while it is true that ISOs are not subject to ordinary income tax at exercise, the spread between the strike price and the fair market value of the stock at exercise is subject to alternative minimum tax. Ugh. So depending on your situation, if you pay the AMT when you exercise an ISO, you may not get the full benefit of the long-term capital gains treatment. In fact, because of the way the AMT works, which is well beyond the scope of this workshop, you may end up paying a higher rate by holding the stock than you would pay by exercising the option and selling the stock the same day. And that, friends, would just be plain bad tax planning, which we will not have. ISOs come with a holding specific rules, like we just talked about. And if you hold the shares acquired from ISOs for at least 2 years from the date of grant and 1 year from the date of exercise, you'll get favorable long-term capital gains tax on the appreciation rather than ordinary income. But like we said, you can trigger the AMT and you better beware. If you've been granted ISOs, it's crucial to understand how the AMT can impact you. Always perform an AMT calculation when you exercise ISOs and hold the shares to ensure that you are aware of any potential tax implications. Okay, let's take a look at the checklist that we went through with Mike for his stock options. First of all, we read through the documentation. We understood the options that were granted to him. Checklist item number 1, do you need help understanding the options granted to you? Yes, he did. We went through the company agreement and we determined there were 2 potential equity compensation methods to be aware of. One was the restricted stock units, and the second were these non-qualified stock options. Did he need help determining the tax implications at grant? Yeah, well, we figured that out pretty quickly, that they were going to be ordinary income recognized at grant. And then, recognized at the exercise. And then after exercise, if we waited before selling shares, we would then incur capital gains. Is the exercise price less than the fair market value at the grant date? Nope, we've been very fortunate in that regard. His particular stock has done quite well. The company's doing well, and all of his stock options at the current time are what they call in the money, meaning the exercise price is higher than it was the fair market value at exercise is higher than the grant. Are you subject to a vesting schedule? Yes, he certainly is. And we are aware of that, and we are tracking that through our software and through our investment planning with him. Is he going to be subject to clawback provisions? No. Does he need to review how to terminate, how termination of employment might affect? Not really. We're not worried about that for him at this point. Although, again, it is good to go in and read the grant agreements so that you understand what you've gotten into, and probably a good idea to review them on an annual basis. Exercise issues. Does he need help determining the value of his interest? Yeah, we wanted to make sure that we were taking a look at the value for a couple of reasons. One of them being understanding how it was impacting his wealth, and the other being how it was impacting his risk. And we'll get back to that here in a second. Do you need to assess your employer's future equity value and long-term viability? No, he works for a Fortune 500 company. We talked about that last time with the RSUs. So we're not super worried about what's going to happen if the employer were to go away. Do you need help determining the income tax implications of exercising vested options? Yes, he certainly does. It's something that we're working on throughout the year, trying to figure out good times to exercise and sell. And in his case, we want to do exactly that. We want to exercise and sell, avoid any capital gains issues, and decrease the amount of exposure he has to his employer's stock. You know, we talked about it last time, but actually as part of his 401k, not only does he have the non-qualified stock options and the RSUs, but he's got a stock account inside of his 401k that is about 10% or so of his overall holdings. So for most of his non-qualified stock options, as well as RSUs, we're looking to sell those as soon as we can. We don't want to hold on to the company stock for risk tolerance reasons, and we would prefer to sell it, avoid capital gains, and reinvest in something else that is more diversified. Do you need help determining the income tax implications of exercising vested options? We just said, yes, he does. Are you permitted to early exercise and purchase stock before vesting? No. Do you lack the funds necessary to do a cash exercise? He doesn't, but we still end up doing cashless exercise, meaning we sell stock in order to pay the taxes and not only federal income tax, but state income tax as well at exercise. Share and ownership of and sale of stock issues. Do you own unvested shares due to an early exercise? No, he does have some unvested shares at this point. But again, we're monitoring his vesting schedule as part of his investment plan. Do you need help determining the basis of your shares? Nope, got that pretty well nailed down, again, through the investment planning. Do you need help understanding the tax consequences of the sale of shares acquired through your options? Yeah, that's something we definitely looked at and have decided to exercise and sell. Does the company require pre-clearance or have blackout or window periods? They don't. Do you need to increase your withholdings beyond any employer withholding to make estimated payments for taxes attributable to your options? I checked yes. The real answer there is maybe. This is an ongoing piece that we monitor as part of his tax planning so that we understand if he goes over certain amounts of income, the withholding they've done on these exercises is not going to be sufficient. Now, that's a lot of income. So many people probably won't get there. He may not. It's, again, something we need to evaluate as the year goes on. Do you need to evaluate your company stock position? Yeah, we talked about that. He has over 10% in company stock already. So we need to be very careful about how much we exercise either through RSUs or incentive stock options. Need a plan to mitigate concentration of risk? Yeah, and we've got that in place. Do you need help factoring in the risks of a stock price decline? No, not really, because again, we are looking to exercise and sell almost exclusively with his RSUs and non-qualifieds. Do you need to address your options in your estate plan or in a pending divorce? Divorce, no. Estate plan, yes. Do you need to consider any state-specific issues? Absolutely. He lives in a high-tax state, and it's something we need to factor in, especially for his tax planning. Do you have future financial goals that your options could help to achieve? Abso-freaking-lutely. It's called retirement, and that is goal number one, and where all of this money really is pointed at helping in the future. All right. Remember, being on glide path for and into retirement starts with a smart approach, making sure your sources of income, medical and healthcare planning, advanced planning, risk management, and tax-efficient strategies are what? All working together. If they're not, they need to be. So message me and let's figure that out. And if you want a copy of this week's checklist or need to ask questions about incentive stock options or restricted stock options or any other topic in my Smart Approach to Retirement series, you can email me at patrick@victoryindependentplanning.com. Hey, thanks for checking in. We'll see you next week. Well, my fellow historians, that is all for this week. Be sure to check out my book. It's History Lessons for the Modern Investor, in case you didn't know. And that's available on Amazon.com. Be sure to do all the social stuff with me. Like this episode, give us 5-star reviews, and follow us wherever you see or hear your podcasts. We're on Substack, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube. Hey, until next week, and we'll take another rollicking romp through the past and make an investment in your future with History Lessons for the Modern Investor.
See you next week.